Hello, Philosophy 71. This is week 7, I'm sorry for us, after the break. And we are doing, today we start speaking about Socrates and Plato. We start with Plato's dialogue Euthyphro. So read the dialogue and then also do, as always, you should, the discussion board entry. Okay, so basically on Socrates' idea of justice in the Euthyphro. Remember, this is the class that we started with. Uh, Basically, we started with Lao Tzu, then Confucius, Buddha, and then we did the pre-Socratics, 2 weeks on the pre-Socratics and the Sophists at the end. And now we do Socrates and Plato for, this week, week 7, and also week 8. Then next week we'll do Phaedo, another dialogue by Plato. These two dialogues are the early dialogues by Plato on basically Socrates, right, never wrote anything, so everything we know about Socrates comes from Plato, other people. Plato was Socrates' student, and so in any case, Socrates figures in the Euthyphro in all the other dialogues as a character. In these early dialogues by Plato, there is also precisely an exposition of the philosophy of Socrates. So that's why for the purpose of this class, at times I say Socrates, Plato, or Socrates slash Plato. But we have ideas that are, presented here and then developed later by Plato. Actually, before we get into a quick reading of Euthyphro, I want to emphasize this theory, the theory of ideas or forms. You see, in the syllabus, I also put as the keywords for today: Socrates and the ethical question, but then also the key concepts of piety, right? Piety, not pity, piety, right? Compassion, okay? Justice, and then ideas and in parentheses or forms, okay? We'll go back to this next time with Fedo, even in more important ways, but I try to be as clear, as simple as possible, just to give you a sense of this theory of ideas. Keep this in mind, which is not developed in elaborated in Euthyphro, this dialogue we are reading this week, but it is applied there. In fact, when you see the word form, the form of justice, right? So then you have to keep in mind this idea, which is this theory of ideas or forms, idea or forms, same word, basically same concept. Okay, they are interchangeable, which is in a sense counterintuitive. It is like looking at the world upside down, I will say, very simply and maybe simplistically. Okay, in Socrates and Plato, we had this theory whereby the world in which we live, of material, sensible things, many tables, many chairs, many people, and so on and so forth, right? This one is not the real world, or not the really real, the truly true world. Okay, the real world, right, or the really real one is on a different plane, a different sphere altogether. It's a different world altogether, and that is called the world of ideas, okay, or forms. Okay, so basically, right, you have many chairs, many cars, many tables in this world, but you only have one idea of a chair, table, car. Okay, so this idea of chair would be also perhaps addressed as chairness, ness, the suffix, meaning the state of being, the condition of being, right? So chairness is the chair itself, the chair with a capital C, tableness, carness, humanness, and so on and so forth. Many people many human beings, many humans, but one idea of a humanness or a humanity, and so on and so forth. Same with all the other categories. As you will see, this is applied in Euthyphro in relation to the idea of justice, for example, right? Piety, good and bad, right and wrong, and so on and so forth. And then we will see in Phaedo next week, it is even more elaborated, more developed, and then Plato will go on in his later works in which he uh, really develops his own philosophy, like Republic. We are not reading, but where this theory is even more, presented in a more sophisticated, in a fuller way. Okay, so but in any case, I hope that these words are sufficient for you to understand that that's basically the paradigm, the model that basically we saw this at the beginning of this class when we were still in a face to face situation, and I spoke right the first class I gave a presentation of these key concepts in philosophy. If you remember, metaphysics, ontology, epistemology. Metaphysics speaking about the split, the distance between within reality, between appearance and essence, between what seems to be the case, what in fact is the case, and so on and so forth, right? There is something beyond, that's the assumption, there is an underlying reality in the case precisely of Socrates, Plato. Then this reality, which is the really real reality, truly true reality, is precisely ideal, not in the sense that it is a psychological construct. Okay, these ideas or forms, the idea, for example, of a chairness, the chair as such, chair itself, chair with a capital C, justice as such, beautifulness as such. There are many beautiful things, but then there is only one idea of the beautifulness, beauty. Okay, all these ideas are not mental psychological constructs, right? They are not simply in my mind, but they are really existing on, if you will, a higher plane of reality, and a truer plane of reality, because in that on that plane there is no change. Things are always the same, right? Eternal ideas don't change, whereas in the world of physical, sensible things, material things in which we are, things change all the time, right, and so on and so forth. Uh, Chairs are made, chairs are destroyed, people are born, then they die, and so on and so forth. Okay, but the ideas are eternal, they don't change. Okay, so there is permanence. That's what we saw. You go back to last week in Parmenides, right? Permanence, no change, and in the world of material sensible things, the world precisely of a becoming, coming to be, there is change. Becoming, coming to be, passing away, there is change. Okay, whereas in the world of ideas there is permanence. That's the world of a being. That's what things really are like, whereas in this world things are not, or they are at this moment, then they pass away, so they become, they come to be, they change. Okay, so in any case, that's basically the theory of ideas that we will see next time as well. I hope that this is as simple and simplistic as it is, that it gives you a sense of this model, this theory, this paradigm that you have to keep in mind in order to then understand, right, what's going on in even Euthyphro, which is basically, is a very interesting, very important dialogue in precisely the field of ethics. It deals with important ethical questions, and I will call attention to some of the most important, okay, of these moments in Euthyphro. I mean, basically, Euthyphro is a younger guy than Socrates. They meet, right? Socrates always speaks with people, especially younger people. That's how why he gets in trouble with the law, right? The authorities in Athens. Then he is right. I mean, there is a trial against Socrates. Then he's executed in prison. That's the trial we are not reading. The defense he gives of himself. You can read that as well. You can find it easily online. It's called Apology. Another dialogue, which is really not a dialogue, it's a monologue, because there in the Apology it is only Socrates speaking, but there he gives a defense of himself at the trial against him. He's accused of corrupting the youth of Athens, praying to the wrong gods and so on. He's found guilty of impiety precisely, and he is then in prison. He is executed. That's at the end of Phaedo. You will see that as you read the Phaedo next time. But in any case, Euthyphro and Socrates meet in court, because Socrates is going precisely because he's been prosecuted by some people, right? And then Euthyphro is there going to court because he is prosecuting his own father for murder. Okay, his father killed someone. He killed a worker, a slave in his household, and so I mean the idea is Socrates says immediately, well, Euthyphro, you must know very well the difference between right and wrong, because right, it is not an easy thing to do, to go and press charges against your father, even if he committed murder. So you must know, right, very well, understand very well the distinction between right and wrong, piety, impiety, and so on and so forth. Okay. So and then I can't, we can't go through out the whole dialogue. You will read, especially the highlighted sections, but Socrates, that's his method, his way of reasoning and asking questions continuously, a question after another question. The idea is to try and reach the truth, right? I mean, for Socrates and Plato, contrary to what we saw in the Sophists, if you remember that eliminate the question of truth altogether, they say, yeah, there is truth. Of course, the point is to search for the truth. Maybe we will not find the truth, but we have to continue, keep looking for the truth. Okay, so the question is, he asks questions, no answer given to him by Euthyphro is good enough. For example, when he asks Euthyphro, well, can you tell me the difference between the pious, the impious, or the holy, the unholy? That's what probably you have in your translation. You see on page 3, right? And then if you go to the margin, the left, right, of the page, you see numbers and letters. Those are the same in any given version, translation, even in the original text. Okay, that's true of all classic works, right? So you can find your way. So if you go to 4e on page 3, then you see that that's the idea. Well, it's unholy for a son to prosecute his father for murder. That's Euthyphro speaking, not really Socrates, right? So the question is, well, then you must know. This is 5d at the end, the bottom of page 3. Well, what sort, this is Socrates asking Euthyphro a question, what sort of thing do you say? Holiness, the holy, right? Piety, right, is, or the good, right? And unholiness, right, the wrong, right? And impiety, unholiness are, right, with respect to both murder and everything. So, and then the question is, it is here that you find the top of page 4, the word form. It's the first word on the beginning, the top of page 4. This form is a technical word, okay? That's what you have to keep in mind. Form or idea, it refers back, right? to the theory of forms or ideas that I just, sketched a moment ago. Okay, so and that's at the end of page three, right? The bottom of page three, and then you go on to page four. That's what Socrates says, right? But the same, right? Or isn't the pious the same as itself in every action, and the impious in turn, uh, the complete opposite of the pious? Isn't the good the same in all good actions? All good actions, right, must include the good. All bad actions, the bad, and so on and so forth. Okay, isn't this the case? That's Socrates asking the question, right? And he continues, but the same, which is the same, this good, pious, right, must be the same every time, the same as itself. It cannot change, right? So, but the same as itself, and everything that in fact turns out to be impious, I'm reading, has a single form. This is, very important. A single form. It will come back. Okay, so then Euthyphro is bound to agree, and then he always agrees with Socrates, but Socrates keeps asking questions, and at the end of the dialogue, you will see they say, well, then next time let's meet again, and we'll go back to the argument, because they don't reach, right, a solution at the end. So, but Socrates here says, what do you say the pious is and what the impious? Then Euthyphro answers with a very interesting here in relation to, think about the distinction between ethics and the law. Euthyphro says, well, that's what the law says, right? The law establishes the difference between right and wrong, and so on and so forth. This is how the law stands, says Euthyphro, but the answer is not good enough for Socrates, right? Then I will not now go through all the questions and the answers, but basically, when at one point Socrates says, well, tell me what the pious, right, the good is, Euthyphro will say, what I'm doing now? What I'm doing now, that's good, that's pious, that's the right thing to do. And Socrates will say, well, I'm not asking you for an example, an instance of a good action, a pious action, a right action, but precisely for the form itself that makes all good actions good, all pious actions pious, all right actions right, and so on and so forth. All just actions just, right? There must be one form, like a common denominator, let's put it this way, which must always be there. That's what I'm asking you to show to me, and not just point to an example and say, this is, what I'm doing now is right or pious or good, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in any case, you read the whole thing, you will see how then they disagree again when Euthyphro tries to say, well, what the gods like is good, what they don't like, what they love is good, what they don't love is bad. There is a storm, right, starting right now, a thunderstorm. Probably you hear that in the video, but in any case, then, the most important point for you to consider is on page 8, okay, go to that page, page 8, line 10a, at the top of the page, where Socrates asks, right, I read the whole line, will soon know better, he says, speaking to Euthyphro, my good man. This is Socrates' ironic way of speaking. Remember the irony also, you will see before that, when Socrates says, well, take me, I want to become your student so that you can teach me, because apparently you know all these things very well, and so on and so forth. That's ironical. So, but here, page 8, line 10a, right? The question is, think about this. That's what Socrates says. Is the pious loved by the gods because it is pious, or is it pious because it is loved? That's the most fundamental, in a sense, ethical, moral question, which will remain in place throughout the history of philosophy. A modern philosopher like Leibniz says the same, right? By rephrasing, and even today, I mean, if you change the words, right? If you take away words like love, gods, and pious, I mean, the right thing to do is something right, good, because we like it. It doesn't have to be the gods, or are we supposed to like it and comply with it because it is good? Okay, so that's basically the question. I mean, can anyone, including God, the gods in the Greek tradition, they had many gods, or a very powerful person, right, the leader of whatever country and so on, who has a lot of power, the sovereign, the king, and so on and so forth, a dictator. Can anyone, including God, change the nature of things? Can anyone make the good bad and the bad good, the right wrong and the wrong right? The answer, the Socrates and Plato give is no, and the answer that very often is given in philosophy is no. You know, you cannot change that. I mean, you can change the name of something. You can call things one way or the other. You can label things differently, and that's what the law does, right? Because it think about the law. The law precisely says this is right, this is wrong, this is legal, this is illegal, and so on and so forth. This is good, this is bad. But the law is self referential. The law is language, powerful language, and the law can change the name of things about. But the law, the idea is the law cannot change what things really are, the nature of things, and certainly this is in the split. Think about this between the law and ethics. This is what ethics is for Socrates and Plato concerned with the uh, right, the unchanging nature, eternal nature of things, of the real things, ideas or forms. You cannot change that, right? You can call things by different names. Again, the law, you know, we know the law, right, can do anything, right? The unjust law. Why is it unjust? Because the unjust law says that something can be done when it is fundamentally unethical, immoral, criminal, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, again, people can make the human made law, or positive law, the law made by human beings, right? Then can change, and it does change all the time, right? You know, one example should suffice for all. When slavery was legal and it was sanctioned in the law of many countries, and it was legal throughout the world, whereas today, right, international law, by international law, slavery is a crime against humanity, right, and rightly so. I mean, this is, although slavery is still happening illegally outside of the law, but the question is, even when it was sanctioned by the law, when it was made legal, that doesn't mean that the slavery was right. It was always right from the ethical point of view, let alone the law made by humans, by men. But from the ethical point of view, which is the point of view of humanity, which is the point of view of reality, the real reality that Socrates and Plato are speaking about. From that point of view, something like slavery was always wrong, even when the law said that it was right. Okay, so you cannot change the nature of things. That's their ultimately. That's their philosophy, right? You cannot change the nature of things. You can change the way you know, the names that you use to address things. That's what the sophists taught us, but Socrates and Plato are reacting against the sophists, right? So that's basically the idea. So remember that this is really the most important moment in Euthyphro. Think about that. You know, again, at the top of page 8, right? I said 10a, the line 10a, and then you read the rest as well, and you will see that at one point, right, when Euthyphro says, because they continue the discussion, and toward the end of the dialogue, 14, page 13, 14e, between the 14e and 15a, but at the top of page 14, 13, 1, 3, then they are speaking about still what the pious is, the good is, and so on and so forth. Then they are speaking about this kind of trading between gods and humans. I don't want to go into that, but in any case, what's important now is that Socrates at one point says, so piousness, good for gods and humans, Euthyphro, would be some skill of trading with one another, right? And Euthyphro says, okay, if naming, I spoke about the difference between the nature of things and the name that we use to address, to speak about the nature of things, to label things, right? If naming it that way is better, sweeter to you, if you prefer that, call it trading. That's okay, says Euthyphro. But Socrates says, as far as I'm concerned, nothing is better, nothing is sweeter unless it is true. I prefer nothing, in another version of the same text, which is better maybe. Socrates says, I prefer nothing unless it is true. It's not what I prefer, it's not what I like, right? It's not the name that I like to use, right? When I speak about things, but it is the truth itself. So I prefer nothing unless it is true. So what Socrates is saying, we are, right? The most important thing for us is to really try not to establish any truth the way the law does, but to find, discover the real truth. Okay, so whether you agree or disagree with this take, in this philosophy in Socrates and Plato, next time we'll speak more about this with Phaedo too, but this is very important. Okay, so that's basically the idea. I hope that I made this somehow clear. Remember, the theory of ideas or forms, that's what the real reality is, and then on the other hand we have the way in which we speak about things, and we can change that, right? And the difference between the real world of being eternal, ideas and forms where things don't change, and the world of becoming and change where we are, right? Okay, so that's basically what they're addressing. So, but the question is to find, to be able to find, not to establish in any right, way, the way that the sophists, through language, for example, they were speaking about, right, the Protagoras, remember? No, but the point is to really find what the truth is, what the nature of things is. Okay, so I hope that this was clear. Then do the reading, do the discussion board entry on the basis of my question, my suggestion in the syllabus, or any other moments in the Euthyphro that you like. You can react to my video as well. Okay, and I will see you next week. Okay, and I hope that everybody is doing well. Okay, see you next time. Bye.